Okay.
Thank you for inviting me, Pamela, to share my work with your students. I'm, honored. The title of my show is Of Seeds and Snow. I've been working on a series of paintings that are dealing with the duality of weather elements like snow and particles like seeds or sand or dust or ash and snow in combination, because it helps me create this evocative world through which I try to reach out to my deepest memories of my childhood in the war-torn Yugoslavia where I grew up. So my earliest memories of my homeland are the ashes and snow and the mixture of color that happens when the snow covers the destroyed landscape or urbanscape from the Civil War. Um, and the snow being this really soft factor of protection and covering and buffering also created this silent world that allows for memories to come about. So my entire painting over, and I've been painting professionally for the last 30 years, is really about creating this contemplative place in my paintings for people to silently walk in and um, seek contemplation or a quiet place for reaching out their own deepest memories. I've been painting. I was traditionally trained as a painter at the National Academy of Art of Montenegro, and then got my MFA in painting from the Pennsylvania Academy of the Fine Arts. I was, trained in oils and have been a diehard oil painter for many, many years, and I still teach oil painting. I created a very particular type of paint application, which is very thin layers and glazing in multiple layers of paint that create this transparent depth. And after many years of working with oils, I started working with acrylic parallel to that and trying to force acrylic to behave in a similar fashion as oil does, allowing me to create this multiple wash-like thin layers of paint or glazes over and over to kind of create this sense of depth and layering. And I've, managed to do that. And thankfully, as acrylic industry um, advances and allows for the painting techniques to kind of evolve alongside with the medium, I'm almost exclusively now painting in acrylics, and I would be happy to answer any questions students may have about my techniques. I paint both on canvas and wood panels, as you can see in the exhibition, trying to kind of utilize very carefully the benefits that the substrate gives you when you paint. I want young artists, and I always emphasize it with my students, to be very particular about their materials, because they are a vehicle for the spirit, if you will, and be very articulate about their paint application, because the only contact you have with the surface of your painting is that brush, and it is really the only conduit that allows for your aesthetics, for your message, for your spirit really to kind of inhabit that material and speak for itself. So you'll notice that the surfaces of my paintings, both in wood panels and canvas, are very smooth, but they do evoke this sense of layering and depth. I labor very carefully to create this feeling as if the painting is painted by the weather or elements rather than human hand, even though it's clear that, it's made, it is made, which is why I don't sign my paintings. I want the surfaces of the paintings to have this quiet presence of just being there. And as if the painting was made, as if the mark was made by water or snow. Kind of particle accumulation on the surface, which is why I call this, latest body of work of seeds and snow. You'll see there is a transition between the landscapes that include woods to elements from the nature, like seed pods that are suspended in this kind of moment of frozen uh, afterlife in the winter, so that the seed containers or, those pods are dormant, but they are full of potential life because they're seeds. So I really appreciate and enjoy this moment of dormancy and quietness of something that has passed or is on its way out, like life. But then this liminal space between that death, if you will, and the moment when it kind of goes back to life, which is spring, is this moment of like quiet and suspension that's usually actually the most active part of the life of that seed in that pod, because that's where things are cooking, if you will, until the spring comes and the seeds come back to life again. So I've been using my art to convey this message of hope, if you will, for this dormant period before the life comes back. I've always been fascinated by this transition between something being and ceasing to be, and then coming back again, if you will. I'm sure it has everything to do with my experience, my early experience of life growing up in the war-torn country, and also in a Slavic tradition, that it's very Eastern Orthodox Christian at its core. So this philosophical, if you will, or contemplative understanding of life as one of the stages of being is something that I think my art is very deeply immersed in. So I am very much drawn to that potential that seeds have as a symbol of rebirth, if you will. So I had a long transition throughout my body of work, and if you've visited my website, which I hope you did, will kind of give you a trajectory of my painting, that now that I have a good 30 years, of practice behind I could see that there has been a constant theme throughout the work, and I always work in the series. I'm, working through a series of works that I kind of, until I completely exhaust or, that idea or topic, and then I kind of gradually move on to another topic, which I now see is actually overlapping with the previous one, and then will overlap with the future one, that I could clearly see this trajectory of my interests in decay and a hope or potential for that decay to kind of reconfigure itself again into something new and better. So I had a series of urban landscapes that went through the period of destruction and then this quiet that comes over the day after, So I have a whole body of work of urbanscapes, architectural structures, interiors of spaces that all seem to be submerged in water or snow. And then I went through the phase of barren natural landscapes that are either through the phase called of the sand and snow, that are like very barren, almost like a beach scenes that are almost abstracted. And speaking of abstraction, I do go back and forth and sometimes kind of dwell in between this tendency to work in very representational manner, but then also move away from representation into abstraction. And if you think of the word abstraction, that comes from the Latin word abstrahere or abstract, meaning it means really extracting the essence of something and then presenting it at its kind of barren core. So in a way, abstraction is the essence of reality. So knowing that, and constantly thinking about that, even in my most abstract works, you could actually feel the presence of reality or the presence of existence kind of condensed into or peeled away from, in order to kind of present the essence of that abstraction. So I do play between those. Sometimes within the paintings themselves, you can see in some of the paintings you have there in the gallery, that there are some elements of the landscape, like the branches, that are like very representational and like strongly rendered and cored into reality, to some elements of the shadows or underneath the layers behind that are kind of abstracted notion of space. So pulling this back and forth, I really enjoy that magic that happens between reality and reality, or or surrealism, if you will, that kind of creates this opportunity for people to question and challenge their own realities and try to find ways into this magical world in between, if you will. I often get questions about color choices. My paintings are really difficult to photograph or represent in a digital form, whether it's on, websites, because of, as you know, there's nothing like experiencing the world of art than, experiencing it in live, especially given the fact that we understand how pigments work and the opacity and transparency of pigments and the way they refract light. So when you look at my paintings carefully, you'll notice that they're not black and white. They are actually in color, and I'm very particular about the color choices I make about my paintings. They're very subtle shifts in earthen tones that really suggest that connection with nature and soil. As you know, earthen tones are actual earth pigments, whether they're umbers or siennas or ochres. Those are all earthen pigments that have a varying degree of oxidized iron in them, and then they change colors based on the way we treat them temperature-wise. So, burnt ochre of course, and paint from the tube. I am very particular building the palette that I work from. I do underpainting layers, which are the thin layers of paint underneath the actual final stages of painting, over which then I apply drawing and I draw with the brush, drawing like structure, and then I start layering very thin, transparent layers of titanium pigment that I mix with water and acrylic medium to create this sense of snow that covers the paintings and kind of subdues them in this kind of quietness of a snowy landscape. And that's how I go about building my canvases or panels. And I would say I have at least like 10 layers of paint on my surfaces, even though they're very thin and very transparent, but they do kind of build up this suspended space of refracted light so that you have this kind of feeling as if you can walk into them. As when I finish my painting, I apply a thin layer of varnish as a protection for the surface, but also as depending on the type of varnish you use, I'm sure you know that in your painting background. It also allows for a different type of light refraction to create this feeling of depth, and I use in most cases high gloss varnish or gloss varnish. It allows for the surface of the painting to always feel and appear as if it's wet, which then gives the most intensity to the pigment and the color. So it does have this kind of like wet quality or like refracted light quality off of the ice or frozen water, which then kind of emphasizes the the idea behind my work and subject matter as well, because all of the paintings feel as if they're either submerged in snow or water or icy surface of lake. So that's how and I'm kind of talking a little bit about techniques behind my work as well as the concept and subject matter, because I think it reinforces this idea that as an artist, you keep all of these things together as you work on your work. And you'll notice that there is the way I organize my exhibition. I kind of grouped the paintings that are wintry wooden landscapes in one wall, and they kind of transition towards the paintings that have seed pods in them, that they all kind of gradually connect and move from one into another. And I think it's the background that allows for that, but it also kind of gives you a sense of what it means to work in the series or a body of work, So you'll notice that, paintings kind of move slowly from one to another and kind of continue telling this story about them. So you feel almost like as you walk by this long wall that you are in the winter forest. And that's, also something to kind of think about when you're working on your art, to really think about longer sentences and how one painting becomes a word and a sentence, and then there's another painting that's another word, and you kind of build the meaning very much like you would in your natural language through the language of visual means, to create this story for your audience to kind of understand. I've been interested in working in diptychs for several years now, which are two panels put together, so it's diptych. If there were three, it would be triptych, right? And polyptych with more. Because I am, again, very curious about that liminal space in between. So you'll notice that diptychs, those landscapes that have two panels put together, the story goes from one to another, so it kind of creates the same scene, but it does have this break in it, that even if sometimes people install my works with like a half an inch space in between, that kind of allows for this pause. I also have, you'll notice most of my paintings have this horizon line that goes horizontally across both panels or both canvases, that also creates this kind of interruption or gap. And I think I subconsciously wanted to kind of address this world above and world below, which again reinforces this notion of life and afterlife or before afterlife, what comes, and how both worlds in a way are connected, whether it's through the roots or the stump of the tree, or reflection of the tree in this second, lower bottom of the lower half of the painting. But that kind of horizon line or division between up and down is also another moment of that liminal space, in between, then I think allows us to kind of, and usually they're lighter, so they kind of suggest this like light that penetrates through, which is why it's also called the horizon line, because that's how we understand this, the landscape around us. It's the horizon line that separates the earth below and skies above. So I have these types of divisions on canvases and panels that I create all the time, and I think it is because I constantly think about that duality of life and existence, and I reinforce it then through the formal choices I make, both in terms of composition, but also in terms of putting paneling together. So that's why I have those diptychs together. And sometimes diptychs are larger and they're large panels, and sometimes they're smaller, but it's not only because I want to conquer more surface and more space, and two panels are easier to handle than one, but it's also because I really want to have this type of separation, between them, and then really think about what comes next in a way. I do have much larger canvases in my other bodies of work. Maybe some of them are 120 inches long and 80 inches tall. They're really large cityscapes, or I'm not necessarily resorting to multiple panels in order to kind of, expand the actual surface of the painting, but it's really conceptual and philosophical choice, if you will. Uh, yeah, I could go on. If you would like to ask me some questions, I'll be very happy to answer them. I'm not sure, Pamela, how much time do we have?
Go ahead, past.
I'm sorry?
10 more minutes.
10 more minutes? Okay, all right. Do people have any questions that I can take, and then I can go from there?
You got anything? No? No questions?
You can also just give me your reflections on my paintings or your comments.
Comment about them?
I guess like looking at them after hearing the explanation, I definitely see the snow. Cause it was like visual snow, kind of like that foggy feeling when looking at them originally. But now that I understand like the meaning and the thought process behind them, you captured that really well.
Thank you.
Did you guys know that there were two campuses?
Yes.
Also, I thought they were all black and white, but if you look closely, you can see that there's actual color in there.
You're not using any black, are you? It doesn't look like it. Using browns and greens.
I use bone black.
Mhm.
I occasionally use bone black, which is a natural color made out of bone, that is oxidized. And it has, as opposed to Mars black, for example, so the bone black does have a bit of a brownish kind of natural tone to it. And then I always mix it with other earthen tones and never with white, because then, as it kind of achieves a very different type of gray. And for my gray layers, I use a technique called Payne's gray, which means that you mix ultramarine blue and burnt sienna first to create this gradual kind of gray light to it. So you can vary your grays to be more blue and cooler in tone, or maybe be more warm in tone if you add more burnt sienna. So there's like varieties. I like to control the spectrum of warmth in my gray colors by creating this complex gray called Payne's gray by mixing blue and brown. So I do labor carefully about how I build painted layers, definitely to kind of achieve that sense. Now, when you said, only after hearing me talk, my point is, excuse me, because we do live in a very fast world and a digital world, and you guys are a digital generation. You consume images mostly from the screen and the screen of your phone. The way you consume information and visual world is very rapid, which then alters the way your brain processes the information. And usually we process information that comes quickly to us very quickly. So whatever comes in, it comes out very quickly. It doesn't really resonate with you, which is where I think art has an incredible importance in our world, to stop this instant consumerism and asks you to focus on something and look at it for a longer than a couple of seconds you usually give to the visual image on your phone. So with the painting, you actually stop and observe, and all of a sudden these little things start coming forward to you, and then you start understanding. So I'm basically trying to retrain my audience to slow down and absorb information, or slower, because then it kind of you retain it. And in this way, I'm kind of retraining, hopefully, my audience to dig deeper, and by doing that, reconnect again with themselves, which is why I think art and perceiving art in person is so critical to preserving the humanity in the day of digital era.
We're all art majors here, right?
Yes. I know that, we of course utilize all of the technology available to us to reach out now. We are obviously communicating through technology, and you're visiting museum sites and look at the work digitally. I do a lot of research online as well. Most of my work, almost actually all of my work, comes from me walking in the woods or nature, or the cities, and being very strongly influenced by it. And so I work from nature in a way, meaning that I walk around winter storms, or and I'm so sensitive to what I see. I photograph landscapes and cityscapes, and then I work from my own references. So I use technology in that way, but I also paint in a very traditional manner. And I'm decidedly like a painter's painter, in meaning that you need to see my work in person in order for it to strongly deliver its value to you, and then enrich your experience. And in return, you will become a slower observer too, and then, which also means thinking slowly, and maybe feeling, which also then gives you more space to go deeper in, and kind of grasp deeper truths about things, because we all know instant messaging, instant delivery is very superficial and a surface quality. Like, so as artists, I think our role today is to allow this precious gift of time back to people.
Okay. Sheila, any comments? Questions? Nothing? You ever gonna go back to oil?
I teach oil painting. I'm not painting in my own paintings in oil currently. It's also other than the fact that it's dictated by my desire to kind of allow and force the material to work that way. It also is partially dictated by my personal circumstance and health issues that I developed at one point, being overexposed to paint thinners and mineral spirits that adversely affected me in a way that I needed to find another alternative. And I have to tell you, it was really hard for me because I was very deeply in oil technique, and that's my strength. So in the last 15 years, I've been working parallel with oils and acrylic, and now I'm almost exclusively painting in acrylic for my own sake, especially given that my studio is at my home and I have, raised children that were always around my studio, and I had to be very conscious about, working in media that it's less toxic and safe for them. So I'm kind of cultivating this type of approach with my students to be very careful about, use of media and how to safely, and of course there's ways to use safely oil media as well. So I do teach oils there. It's a very valuable and very complex technique that allows for this multi-layered thought process, because you have to control many technical aspects of your work in order to achieve the results, which is how I teach acrylic as well, and how I paint in a way too, is this multi-layered approach to understanding of thick and thin, fat over lean process, and how to build the layers of paint strategically and safely so that it becomes archival in a way.
Beautiful.
That was no way.
Hmm?
So it was no way.
I know, but he's almost done and he knew which time. Okay, thank you so much. This was fantastic and really appreciate it. I wish more of my students had come to the Zoom, but fun.
I do like them.
Yeah, they're beautiful. Yeah, very relaxing. You have to have it. And you hung them beautifully. Thank you. Yeah. Okay.
You're
okay,
very welcome. Thank you for having me.
Thank you very much.
Thank you, everyone, and have a successful rest of your semester.
You too.
Thank you.
Thank you. Thank you.
Thank you.